Hi, welcome to lesson 3.07, which is the last one in lesson 3. And here I will introduce you to electricity transformation. So basically, we're going to do the same as we did in other transformations, but this is a little more advanced because, well, electricity is a little bit special. In this video, I will introduce you to the transformation of our electricity, including the dispatching, merit order effects, and full load hours and the effects that that has. And then I will introduce you to load shapes. I will not go into optimization in this lesson. That will be in lesson 4. So what makes electricity so special? Well, it's only one product, the electricity. So it is a very specific sector that quite a lot of different methods or technologies can produce this one product. And that's what really sets us apart. It is that you have many different technologies to produce just the one product. There's a lot of difference between these different technologies or methods. Some are basically free but uncontrollable. Some are more expensive but freely flexible, and some are in between. Some methods, yes, are intermittent, which especially the renewable ones that we are very interested in normally to model. Other methods can have flexible in the use, but that comes with an efficiency loss for the technology itself. We will not cover that here, but it does get important later on. So for starters, we're going to do simple electricity generation modeling, which means we will not do optimization. We're going to work with a capacity load shape, and we will get some simplified results because of that, because we will use a specific merit order effect. So that's usually how you do it simply without optimization. So I will first just have to introduce you to time slices, which is important for analyzing electricity generation, and becomes much more important when we're coming to optimization, where we'll have a big effects. The reason why we use time slices is because calculating every hour of every year, which is 8,760, is very impractical. So instead what we do is we categorize the different hours into time slices. The reason why it's impractical is because this will of course be a lot of different data sets or different data in a time slice, and it will take quite a long time and require quite a lot of power to model. The practical benefits of doing 8,760 time slices is usually not that much greater than doing a more aggregated time slice. And the more complex, we can choose more of them, but generally we don't gain that much in most cases. These time slices can either be chronological, so a week in May, or a 4 different variations of a day every month and so on, or as a load curve where we are defining the load curve as the percentages of peak load and then declining that over the year. We can freely choose between these two. The model doesn't really care. So examples for the simplified load curve is that we split the year into X number of hours. That could be 1,500 or 20 if that's what we want, and then we sort them from highest to lowest. Usually that's what we do with the load curve. For more specific chronological time slices, we can have daily variations in seasons. So that could be that we take a normal day in each of the 4 seasons, that's 4 time slices, or we could also have daily variations for months. We could even do that for 24 hours in a day, 4 months, so that would be 24 times 12 months, which is somewhat 300 odd something time slices. We could also say that we have daily variations for number of hours or granularity in days in both weekdays and weekends. So that could be for each month, or it could be hourly for a weekday and weekends, or even distinct weekdays and weekend days. So a number of ways of doing this, and I will get more into that now. So how to add a time slice in Leap is that we just go into the general and then we look here into time slices. In here, in time, I should also look further into now. Now that we are in the menu, let's look at how to set up our time slices. We only have one set of time slices that we need to use throughout the model, but that's quite standard, otherwise it would confuse the model too much. So here we can see we already have a set of time slices. This is just a year divided into hours from 0 to the end in thousands, and then with the remainder. But we have many other ways we can do time slices. So if we go in here to setup, we will actually get quite a lot of help with doing that. So here we can say we can make a simple one. We don't have seasonal daily data, we just have a slice duration for the year. So we can set this to, for instance, 500, and we should double the number of our slices. All right, sure. And now you can see that we have our year divided into 500s, and with the last one being 260, just a remainder. This is very practical if you want to do load curve shapes where you're not interested in being chronological about your time slice set. However, we often want to have a chronological time slices. So if you go into setup again, you can say detailed. Here we get a lot of options, and we'll click to configure. So this is down to a different complexity. If you say the whole year, we only get one time slice, but then we can also multiply that by the number of time slices for our different versions of weekdays and weekend days and weekdays and so on. So for instance, here we can say we have just one time slice for the whole year, times here you have 2 for the weekdays and the weekend days. And we want a 4-hour period to have morning, day, evening, and night. So that's 1 times 2 times 4. So that gives us 8 time slices. If you click OK, you see now we have our designated time slices for that. So we can now define our consumption and productions on these time slices, which is quite practical. And this is not too heavy. If you want to have something that's more heavy for these things, we can go and say we want, let's say we want one with 4 seasons, where we have spring, summer, fall, and winter. So that's 4, of course. And we want 7 days a week. And we again would like our 4 hourly periods, morning, day, evening, and night, and so on. So that's 4 times 7 times 4. And we get this warning that this is not compatible with Nemo. So that could limit our options for optimization. So we will have to look at that afterwards. But it's good to be compatible with that. But just let's say look at it for now. So now you can see we get quite a lot of time slices, 112 in all. But let's make something that's compatible with Nemo. So we'll maybe do the same thing. Let's simplify it a little bit. We just say we have 2 seasons, wet and dry. If you are around equator, this might be quite good if you don't have much seasonal variations, where you don't have differences between heating and cooling in these things, then wet and dry might be good. Let's say we want 7 days of the week, and then we want 24 hours in the day. So that's 2 times 7 times 24. That will give us 336 time slices, and that is compatible with everything. So now we can get that, and you can see we have 2 seasons with a lot of different, with a time slice for each hour of the day, for each day of the week. If you want to go even heavier, you can just go directly all hours in the year, and that will give us the full 8,760 hours. But we will get a nice little warning. It's very nice for optimization, but it will be very, very, very slow to calculate, even to a point that server-based models usually don't do this. So we don't usually do this in Leap. This will take a long, long time, and there's a high chance of this failing if you don't have enough RAM in your computer. So we can of course also do it for every day, and then we can just say instead maybe we're just interested in the 4-hour periods. And then we already have it down to 1460, but again, we have a warning about our memory use that could impact. So what we want to have in terms of time slices is really about what we need and what we're trying to achieve with our model. The more granular we want, the more time slices we need, and the more simplified we want, the lesser time slices we can get away with. So in this case, I think I'm going to set mine for 4 seasons. I want weekdays and weekend days, and I want in the 24-hour period, so it's NEMO compatible. So that will give me 192 time slices, which is a good middle number, so I can define my different things. Click OK, and now we have them all here. Good. For now, we're just going to take a look at the load shapes in a load curve form. So in this case, we are going from the peak, which is the 100. So that's the peak capacity of demand. In this case, in electricity for the blue. And then here we are in the last hour. So that's in the first hour. That is the sorted by highest to lowest. So that means here in the last hour, this is the minimal demand capacity that is needed. So this load curve will look different for every country and even for different products. In this case, electricity, it's normal that we have a load curve like this, where these could represent a certain, like maybe night times in a specific season. That, and if it's very high, it could be quite realistic. It could be winter months in a hot country. It could also be the vice versa. If you have a lot of electric heating in a cold country, where like Norway, where you instead have low electricity use in the summer months because there's no cooling. So also we have similar load shape curves for heating, quite a lot used in heating countries, where we have these very cold days, more or less, and then we have a vast area of summer months. Summer defined here as the season, of course. So these can look very differently from what products you're looking at, what energy services, but we can define them both for electricity and heating and whatever we want also in LEAP, if that's what we want. Do ignore the numbers, these are more or less fictional to just showcase. So here we actually have a load shape in chronological hours from LEAP. You can see here that we have 4 different load shapes that are in this chart, and I can tell you that this is from AC air conditioning, where you can see that the summer peak air conditioning is quite high compared to what it is in the winter. So this could be a system in a temperate country, Southern Europe, maybe South Africa, where there's a lot difference between the season on summer and winter. What we also can see here is that we have we go from hour 1 or hour 0 to hour 24. So these represent a day, a normal day for each of these 4 seasons. So here you can also tell that in the early hours, which means during nighttime or after midnight, we have very little demand, and we have even the highest demand is not occurring at 12 or at noon. We'll say noon. I don't remember 8 p.m. or a p.m. or a.m. in this case. So this is noon. No, the actual peak load for the AC occurs during the afternoon when people usually go home from work. So that's an interesting observation that we can tell about the countries and how the electricity system has to account for that. Now, similarly, we can of course also have a system-wide load shape, as we saw before, or we can also define different load shapes. But for now, we will just look at a system-wide load shape, and in lesson 4, with optimization, where that becomes important, we will also look at distinct load shapes for different energy services. So how do we add the load shapes in Leap? Well, that happens in we go into the general menu and then we have yearly shapes. So if you click on that, we get this wizard up and we can actually add our load shapes. You can see the load shapes here are defined on their relations to our time slices as we showed before. And here we just have the load shape time slices divided into hundreds. So here we have a system-wide load shape that we can use later on. We need to define the different technologies for our electricity generations, and we do that under the transformation. We can do that under electricity generation or whichever kind of subcategory we have defined in transformation. The Leap knows that this is a very important sector, so it can be very direct in how you define your electricity generation subsectors. And this can also be done without optimization, though of course if you want to have least cost analysis, you do need to optimize because that is what you're optimizing for. So in this case we need something else that is the designing a variable for how to dispatch our different technologies. So here we can see that we are in under our transformation sector, and I have defined a subsector called electricity generation. If we go into our processes, this is where we have all our different technologies, in this case 8 I think, that all produce electricity, but it can vary differently. So for each of these we have a few things we have to apply before we can do analyze our power generation. So I will not go into all of them. There are different costs. These are capital, variable, and fixed O&Ms. I will not go too much into that right now because we have covered costs, but they can be just input more or less quite directly. Instead, we're going to look at capacities, merit orders, and availabilities, also known as full load hours if it's a VRE, because we need to apply those, and it's quite important to find how we will have to define our electricity generation sector. So the first thing which we have to define, which is quite nice and Boolean, is whether our different technologies are dispatchable or not. The big thing is VREs, which means wind and solar, are not dispatchable. We all know that. That's a bit of a you can't just turn it on if you want to, and that is what dispatchable really means. That also means that if you are applying no to this, as we did with wind turbines, that was ugly, with wind turbines, we can. It also means that this can curtail. The model takes account for that. Next, we also need to define our dispatch rule. And that's basically how do we want to decide, how will the model decide how to use the different technologies. The general method we have is we call merit orders dispatch. And that is something that we define ourselves. We will look at that in the next slide. But that is how do we, that merit order dispatch means that we have a specific priority of which technology to use first. These are usually the cheapest, the most regular, or the most clean. And the cheapest, of course, can also be in terms of cheapest including externalities, which we do in some countries. But that is something that we have to specify ourselves in our model. We do have some alternatives to that. So we can just dispatch as a like full load capacity, so it just adds our one technology until it's full, no matter how much we have. So we just export and use a lot of fuel, try to export so much. We can dispatch depending on which one has the lowest running cost. So we will always just dispatch the one that is the cheapest as for now, which is variable M plus fuel cost. We can also do proportional to capacity, meaning that if we have a gigawatts of coal, 2 gigawatts of nuclear, and half a gigawatt of VRE, then there will be dispatched in that same share, no matter how much energy is needed. So if only half a gigawatt is needed, then a sixth of that will be VRE at all times, and half of that will be nuclear at all times. And then we have some here that we will just run it in a proportion of the process share we have available for the different technologies. So now we come to the merit order. If you choose merit order, this is how we are inputting it. So we can see here all these we have put as an equal, as in 1, the first order. We can go through 1, 2, 3, 4, and etc. And we can see these with 2, those are the lower priorities, usually meaning they're dirty and expensive. So that's why we have given them lower priorities. These of course can be changed. I can tell you that in a Danish system, and this is definitely on a 2, and the same goes for this. Like we put the merit of VREs first, which is usually how it's done in many least cost systems today. Then we also have the maximum availability of our different technologies. These are basically the same as full load hours, but more broadening to also include non-VRE. And that means in a distinct time slice. So right now we're working with 1,000 hours in different time slices. How many of those hours would, what's the percentage of hours that our process is fully available? And we can define that with our maximum availability. So having a low number like this for 35, that means it is very intermittent. That's how we can define that in our model in a very simple way without having a load curve to that or randomization. It just means that, oh, we probably only have the capacity available at random 35% of the time in any given time slice, while in these others we have it for 80, which is mostly available, but something can happen quite often, which they do in real life. The standard for this is 100, and that's usually not realistic for most things. So that's a way to apply that. For solar, it does become a little complicated because here we have a very simplified system where we don't have distinct hours. So it is fine to say that is maybe 30%, but if we had distinct hours in our time slices, we would have to be more nuanced with our solar because it's distinctly at daytime that this is available. So that's a method. That's a bit of a it doesn't quite adhere to this method. Then we also have the exogenous capacity. So if we already have made decisions in our system of what that will happen in terms of committing to either new capacity or getting rid of capacity, we can then put it into here and the model will take that into account. So for instance, in this case, we can see we have this existing cold steam, and we will say that in 2020 we will only have 1,000 megawatts of that, while in 2030 we will have 0. So that is what happens with this. We can see here it's a stepwise function, so the capacity steps down to 0, and these are retirement of old plants. The rest of our system is more or less stagnant in this case, that these are some stagnant figures, so these will just continue, and then the model will allow to decide for itself. So these are the ones we have already made decisions for. Now then, endogenous capacity, that is where the model can decide to invest if it needs to have a capacity. So here we're saying we're putting how much capacity can be invested at a time, and then how are these orders. So we need to put in a method to say that we want to balance our system. So for instance, here we have quite a lot of natural gas CC plants, and to balance that out, when that doesn't work, we will need also to invest in oil combustion and wind plants. So this helps our model decide, and this is usually where we are talking about the main scenario variable for our system. So this will these are the things we change why we can prioritize different technologies for our different scenarios. And normally I would then show you how we can change or add to our system here and look at what these changes are. But unfortunately, I had a bit of a technical issue that I couldn't fix. I found a bug in Leap, which means that every time I change anything, even just on a numbers basis, the model would no longer show me the full external results. So this has been reported. Hopefully that will change. But for now, I can only show you the results that are in Freedonia if I don't change anything. Maybe this is the same for on your model version, maybe not, hopefully not. But that you can check for yourself. I cannot make it work, unfortunately, no matter how hard I try with different models. So I am just going to show you the standard results in the Freedonia model that you can also follow along with. So when I calculate this in my different scenarios where we have specified, we can see here that here is our different time slices. Not all of them are listed by text, but this is the different time slices we have in our model. When we look at our power generation, and for each of these time slices, you can see how the production is from different technologies. And this is in our mitigation scenario where we have quite a lot of natural gas and a bit of wind as well. So this is what has been prioritized in this scenario, usually just by changing the endogenous capacities. We can also then, in this case, we can compare that directly between scenarios. So we can see here. It should be said if you set we use the different versus baseline. If you use avoided, it will just show us how much we gain in lack of production, but not of production type. So if you're working with green versus fossil, you will not gain much by looking at the avoidance. You will gain a lot by looking at the difference. So here we can see we are in our mitigation scenario, we are investing in more wind and we're using more gas instead of using quite a lot of coal steam, and also the oil combustion turbine also is being mitigated away. So we are basically here replacing for almost one-to-one fossil with lesser fossil and clean. So that's our mitigation scenario, and we can see that this is a big difference in our peak hours, especially where we have quite a lot of natural gas instead of coal.